I'm Fatima Rokib.
And I'm Ryan Smith. Over the next 2 hours we will be bringing you live coverage from the Sunderland count as the results come in.
We'll be chatting to our panel of Sunderland residents about who they have been voting for and what policies matter to them, as well as getting their reaction to the results.
And we'll be speaking to political expert Peter Hayes, who will help us analyse and interpret what the results will mean for us here in Sunderland.
But first, let's catch up with our reporter Dominic James, who is already at Silksworth Sport Complex, where the votes for Houghton and Sunderland South, Sunderland Central and Washington Sunderland West are being counted. So Dom, can you tell us what's happening there at the moment?
Yes, I'm here at the Sunderland Silksworth Sports Centre, where behind me all the counts are starting to begin. The first box came in, ran in with the boxes. The van was rather quick, just within a couple of minutes after the count first, once the polls finished. And now the counters are well underway. They're scribbling on their pieces of paper behind me. They're frantically running about, getting all the papers done. The boxes are already being filled up. Stage is already set up ready. We are expecting the first result to come in at around 2:45. The first result we are expecting is the Houghton and Sunderland South. Obviously, the registering the vote ended on the 22nd of May in the Houghton and Sunderland South area. Just over 68,000 people registered to vote in that constituency, and in Sunderland Central 72,000, and in Washington and Sunderland West 67,000 voted in that time round. So in total, just over 208,000 have registered to vote, including 85,000 postal votes. So that is pretty much all I've got for now. We are expecting the result at about 2:45. Catch up with them.
So thanks for that, Dom. In total, there are 17 candidates contesting the 3 seats. There's a brief overview coming up now of who they are and what they stand for.
In Houghton and Sunderland South, we have Richard Peter Bradley. He's championing the environment and the NHS for the Green Party. Paul John Edgeworth, he's your Lib Dem candidate, born and educated in Sunderland and saving local services in one of his pledges. We've also got Paul Howell for the Conservatives. He's been a County Durham councillor and has worked in manufacturing in his region for 40 years. Michael Anthony Joyce is standing for UKIP. He wants a fair deal for Brexit and more jobs to boost the economy. Bridget May Phillipson is defending her seat. She's been MP for the constituency since 2010. If she gets re-elected, this will be her 3rd term as MP. Mick Watson is standing up for Independent Party. He is a pro-Brexit and was living in the North East during the mine strikes of the early 80s.
Starting at Sunderland Central now, and there are 6 candidates. So first off, we've got Sean Christopher Cockburn, who is the independent candidate. He spent 30 years in the civil service, and he's also pro-Brexit. Julie Elliott is the Labour MP. She's standing to try and get re-elected. She was first elected as an MP in 2010, re-elected again in the last election of 2015. And she's recently been out campaigning with Ross Kemp in Sunderland. You might have seen them on Monday. For the Green Party, it's Rachel Sarah Featherson. She is conscious of climate change with plans to try and encourage people to shop more locally rather than imported goods. Niall Dane Hodgson is next. He's standing for the Lib Dem candidate. He's a former councillor who took a seat from Labour in 2016 for the Sunderland City Council, and he'll be hoping to do it again tonight on a national level. For UKIP, we have Gary James Layton. He'd like to get rid of key stage 1 SATs for 7-year-olds. And finally, we have Robert Geoffrey Oliver for the Conservatives. He says that the Weir Bridge and the development of Vauxhall is down to the Conservative government that's been in place since 2010.
In our final ward, Washington and Sunderland West, we've got Tom Appleby for the Lib Dems. He has lived in North East the majority of his life and has served on the Tynedale District Council. For the Green Party, we have Michael Chotsky. He's lived in the North East for more than 10 years. He manages a local charity supporting black minority ethnic communities to integrate in Sunderland. Brian George Foster is standing for UKIP. He is pushing the UKIP policy to revive coastal communities and villages. Jonathan Edward Gullis is the candidate for the Conservatives. He wants to improve treatment of mental illnesses in the region and wants to make sure nobody has to sell their houses to pay for homes fees. Finally, Sharon Hodgson is standing again for Labour. She has been an MP for 12 years and is focusing on getting a good deal in the Brexit negotiations.
So we are joined tonight by our studio guests. We have, like to introduce yourself?
I'm Paul Ruddy. I'm a teacher from Washington, and I'm here representing the Green Party tonight.
Like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'm Alistair Cameron. I work in mental health, and I have at different points voted Green and Labour.
Hi, I'm Suki Dillon. I also vote for Labour, and I am a teacher of IT and work quite heavily with our homeless.
So you are here tonight to discuss the election as it comes in, the results, especially the Sunderland result. So do you want to first start off by telling us what party you should support? We'll start with Suki.
What parties I
Yeah,
support?
what party you support and who you voted for?
Basically, I'm voting for Labour because I think the Tories have destroyed the country in the last few years, and I agree with quite a few of the Labour manifesto policies. Okay. I work around the North East with a lot of homeless people, and I've seen that figure quadruple in the last couple of years. Nobody should be homeless. It's 2017 and we live in Britain. I find it really difficult to understand why this is happening, and the fact that our NHS is under massive strain because of this party, and that frightens me quite a lot.
So, Paul, you support the Green Party, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Do you want to tell us the key issues why you're voting for the Greens?
I've traditionally voted Labour. My granddad was a Labour councillor for donkey's years, and I mean, I've got a socialist star tattoo on my shoulder. I love the Labour Party, but for me, the kind of neoliberalism that we've seen over the last 100 years, it's had its chance. Climate change is about to become catastrophic. In the next 20 years, cities like Lagos and Kingston are going to be underwater. And I've got 2 young kids, and I want them to have a planet to grow up on. So for me, climate change has to be the #1 priority, and the only party pushing it with the Green Party. Whilst I agree with much of what Jeremy Corbyn has to say, for me, climate change has got to be #1.
And Alistair, you're also supporting the Labour Party?
Yeah, though I do empathise and agree with a lot of what's in the Green Manifesto. You know, things like universal basic income. I think I've got tremendous appeal, and there's no denying that climate change is real and a threat. Not, you know, it's not a threat just to Sunderland, but it's a threat to the entire globe. However, my thinking has been more coloured about actually what's going to keep the Tories out. Because the last 7 years have seen a complete deterioration in public services. Local authorities have had funding absolutely slashed, you know, to the bone and beyond, to the point where vital services across the age span, from children's services to, you know, Sure Start, etc., all the way through to older people's services, and all points in between. The things upon which people rely for an adequate quality of life, let alone a decent quality of life, aren't going to be there if we had another Tory government.
So all three of you here tonight to talk about the election as the results come in, especially for Sunderland. We're still waiting for results, but the latest exit poll that we got through has predicted that the Conservatives are the more majority party in the House of Commons at the moment, with 314 seats, so they don't have an overall majority. Does that surprise you, or?
I don't trust the polls. I think a report came out yesterday that the British media is the least trusted media in Europe, and these exit polls tonight are coming from the BBC and Sky and other sources who were kind of 80% funded by 5 billionaires who all support the Tories. So I'd like to wait and see what happens tonight, and I'd love to see a coalition. I desperately don't want the Tories to be in power. I'll be extremely upset tomorrow if that's the case.
So we've just been told that the latest polls, as we've been on air, there is actually no overall majority for any party at the moment. So, would you like, because obviously you support the Green Party, so would you rather like to see a Conservative coalition government or a Labour coalition government?
Oh, without a doubt, a Labour going in with kind of Caroline Lucas and the Green Party with Jonathan Bartley as well, and then you've got Tim Farron in the Lib Dems, you've got Nicola Sturgeon in the SNP, and they to me are true honest politicians. They're not the type who are going to name call and have slanging matches with each other. They'll have political debate and they'll come to a good agreement, and I think that's the way our country needs to go. For me, the time of nastiness and greed and whatever has had its chance. We've seen, like my colleagues here have said tonight, we've seen 7 years of absolute horror on the streets of the North East. I worry about what's going to happen to Nissan and places like that. If the Tories get in, it'll decimate our region. So if that latest poll is true, which that'd be fantastic, I'd be over the moon.
So you two obviously both support Labour. If it is going to be a coalition government, who would you like to see the Labour Party be coalition with? Because it's not going to be straight up coalition like 2010 where you just had two parties. You're going to have to probably have at least 3 or 4.
Well, I mean, being candid, I mean, this is what the Tories call the coalition of chaos, but you kind of think, no, actually that's a coalition of progress. Though coalition of chaos would be a great name for a metal band. You know, you just kind of think that's a band name, that is. Realistically, there's a kind of the way the parliamentary system is set up and the way that votes kind of pile up in different constituencies and the way that constituencies are formed with boundary changes, etc. There's an element which is a slightly inbuilt advantage to the Tory party, just the way things are distributed demographically, etc. So a coalition which is a non-Tory coalition, which is what I would like to see, would have to be quite broad-based. So it would be Labour, Green, it'd be Plaid Cymru, it would be SNP and the Lib Dems, which is quite broad-based, but I'd like to think that amongst those there are still some key core values which are essentially of putting people ahead of corporations and focusing upon ordinary people's day-to-day quality of life. I think there'll obviously be areas of disagreement, but I don't think that the nature of those parties is such that those are insurmountable. I'd like to think that, you know, and furthermore, it will be fascinating if this turns out to be the case. And you know, we've got to treat polls with a pinch of salt, because there's been such variation between the different polling organisations that one or two of them are going to go bust. You know, really are, you know, going to lose their reputation. But amongst all of that, if we get a non-Tory coalition, it'd be interesting to see the impact that has on the Tory party, because I think the knives are out if Theresa May hasn't won.
Yeah. So, Fatima, you've got a question?
Yeah. What about privatising the NHS? What do you say about that? How do you think that's going to work for us?
Well, this is one of the points on which I would actually, you know, lay some blame upon Tony Blair and his brand of Labour, the neoliberal kind of new Labour, where they took on lots of Tory policies relating to public services, including degrees of outsourcing but thankfully it does look like Corbyn has reined those tendencies within the Labour Party right back, because the privatisation of the NHS would be a disaster. There's no two ways about it.
What about you, Suki?
I agree with both my peers here today. The fact that the NHS was founded by Labour, I think it needs to be back under Labour, so we can invest in our people. In the fact that our services are so undercut, I'm seeing it on a daily basis. The fact that it takes an hour for an ambulance to come and tend to one of our elderly people, the fact that it's like a lottery whether you get treatment or whether you're not because of the postcode that you live in.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that I went to the hospital a couple of months ago and they didn't even have plasters. Can you imagine going into a hospital in Britain 2017 and not being able to get just a simple thing as a plaster, as a band-aid? These things shouldn't be happening. And at the end of the day, if there is going to be a coalition government, anything's going to be better than a Tory government. And if that means going into coalition with the SNP, with the Lib Dems, with the Green Party, so be it. Because they are there for the people, not what these Tories are. Like the Labour slogan is, for the many, not the few. And that's what it would be. And that's my view. And at the end of the day, by the end of August, nearly all NHS bursaries for nurses will have ended. There's already a massive deficit and a shortage of nurses, you know, especially with Brexit coming in. A lot of European nurses that we would have had or that did work for us no longer do. And that's because of this party that we're under now. And that worries me greatly.
They are saying they're going to spend £8 billion by 2022.
They say a lot of things though, don't they? And I've lost all hope and I've lost all faith. They're not for us. They're not for the working class person. They're not for the person on the street. We can see that. We can see that when, like my peer said earlier on, the Tories' answer to homelessness was adding spikes. Do you know what I mean? What kind of people are we dealing with here? The pure evil. Do you know what I mean? They're so out of touch with the common man that it's worlds apart.
Okay. We're just going to go back and talk about immigration because that's another topic as well. The Tories obviously saying they want to cut down by tens and thousands. I mean, what do you think of the whole...
I'm horrified. 70,000 years ago, Homo sapiens started to migrate out of Africa, and it's been happening ever since. So in this country we've had the Romans, the Vikings, the Anglo-Saxons, Neolithic man, and they've all done nothing but enrich our culture, our language, our law, our cuisine, our leisure. Everything that we value in this country has come from migration. So after World War II, when we had labour shortages, we invited 157,000 Poles to come and work and fill our vacancies in this country. And that was okay. It was okay when we had slaves coming here to build up our country and build places for people to work. But people who have a problem with immigration, I don't understand what idea of Britishness they want to go back to. Is it okay to eat Italian pizzas, but because you don't like headscarves, Pakistani people aren't allowed? That to me is absolutely abhorrent, and I've got no time for it. My life has only ever been enriched by people from other countries that I've come into contact with. And you'll hear people say, well, what about the jihadis? Well, perhaps if we hadn't meddled in other countries' foreign affairs with the kind of the guise that we are going in to help establish democracy, but the reality of stealing their resources, none of this would be happening. I mean, you never hear of jihadis attacking places like Switzerland or Denmark, peaceful countries which coincidentally top the kind of happiness ratings in the World Happiness Reports every year. Coincidentally, none of these countries have also got nuclear weapons, which is another reason that I'm voting Green. I think migration is a kind of it's a flag wave and nationalistic exercise of the right-wing media to stir up hatred, to get people to fear. It plays on the ego, and loads of people buy into it, and I can't understand people who can't think for themselves. We're all human beings. None of us have got a kind of God-given right to this planet. It's okay for our expats to go to Benidorm and demand a full English breakfast, but it's not okay for migrants to come here and demand to eat their food that they want to eat, or follow a religion that they want to follow. I'm sorry, but...
So obviously immigration was a key issue of the election campaign. I'm pretty sure we'll touch on it again throughout the night, so don't worry, everyone will get a say on it. I know, Suki, you're very passionate about this aspect of it. So we're hopefully going to try and get some results. I'll be going back to Dom. I don't know if I've got him yet. Right, Dom, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Hi Dom, how are you doing? How's the atmosphere there?
We're good. We're good. I'm joined by Peter Hayes, Dr. Peter Hayes, who is the politics lecturer at Sunderland University. Evening.
Good evening, Don.
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
We are expecting the results any time now as well behind us.
It's very exciting to get this first result, and it may give us a good indication of what's going to happen later in the night.
We've just had news as well that it's been the biggest turnout as well.
That increase in turnout here, I think it was 61%, wasn't it? Which I think is up about 5 points on the previous election, is probably likely to benefit Labour. The conventional thinking is that Labour is more popular among younger voters. Younger voters are less likely to vote, so a higher turnout may be a plus for Labour.
Yeah, so obviously any minute now behind us, we are expecting the Sunderland and Horton South constituency.
I think it's Houghton and Sunderland South, as a matter of fact, but, you know, same difference, that's the one, yes.
So it was Labour last time. Bridget Phillipson's running this seat. Are we expecting Bridget to take that seat again?
I think that's a pretty strong expectation. What we'll be listening out for is the strength of the Conservative vote, the strength of the UKIP vote, and, well, we'll see how the Liberal Democrats and the Greens get on as well. But we'll be particularly interested in how the Conservatives and UKIP have fared, because that will give us a sense of the spread of the votes. We'll be able to see whether the UKIP vote has collapsed, as some has predicted, or whether it'll hold up.
What would the collapse in UKIP mean as such? Who would them votes go to?
Again, the conventional thinking is that a collapse in the UKIP vote is going to benefit the Conservatives. That has actually been the Conservative strategy. They've seen polls which show the UKIP going a long way down, and they're thinking they can scoop up all of those votes. So that the expectation at the outset of the election was that...
Sorry for the technical issues there, I think we've lost Dom there. We've just been talking quickly about, while Dom was on there, as a result of the shock exit poll that's predicted a hung parliament with no party, the pound has dropped by 2% in value. Are you pretty shocked by that, or do you think it's expected? Like the pound dropped, like obviously when Sunderland announced that was due to leave, that it wanted to leave the EU when the Brexit referendum was on. So do you think that matters too much at this early stage, or?
I don't, currency fluctuates with all kinds of world events, and the fact of the pound dropping 2% on the money markets, it's neither here nor there. We're talking about the future of the United Kingdom, and I think the fact that the pound has dropped in the last 20 minutes, that small element doesn't, I don't think it's an indicator of anything apart from certain traders thinking, oh, a bit of volatility, let's see if we can do a bit of arbitrage.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people were saying during the obviously the campaign, a lot of sort of bad press we'll sort of say was directed mainly from the Tories towards Jeremy Corbyn, and the fact that Labour is what was described as like there's not an infinite money pot. Do you think it's because of the hung parliament, people's more trusting maybe the Tories with money, or
the fact that they've went from £950 billion to 1.7 trillion, like that speaks volumes. It's there in black and white. You know what I mean? They tend to believe everything else that the media print. Why don't they believe that? So they're on about Labour. At least Labour's wanting to do things to benefit us. What have the Tories done in the last 7 years other than get us into more and more debt and still done nothing with it?
Yeah. Right, we're now going to head over to, I don't know if we've got sound for this. We're watching it live with you as well, so we'll hopefully bring this result now. Oh, here we go, we have sound.
It's as follows.
I hope you can hear this.
Richard Peter Bradley, Green Party,
difficult.
725. Paul John Edgeworth, Liberal Democrat, 908. Paul Howell, Conservative Party, 12,324. Michael Anthony Joyce, UK Independence Party, 2,379. Bridget Maeve Phillipson, Labour Party, 24,000. And Nick Watson, Independent, 479.
Well, they may,
that Bridget May Phillipson has been duly elected to serve as member for the said constituency.
they may be able to count in a hurry. They certainly need to take control of their sound system. Labour won. It was a safe Labour seat, but the Conservatives are up more than Labour in that seat. UKIP went...
So Bridget Phillipson has won. She's retained her seat. Labour win their massive majority, obviously as expected. However, I take it you're happy.
Over the moon, absolutely over the moon. The fact that they've just doubled over Conservative, I am absolutely ecstatic. I couldn't be happier.
How are you feeling about the Green Party's performance, though?
700 and odd people, clearly with their heads screwed on, as far as I'm concerned. Not far behind the Lib Dems, I think a couple of hundred votes by what I heard. I'm quite shocked that so many people still voted for UKIP, but it's a great night for Labour.
How will it affect you having a Labour leader?
I'm still very pro-Labour. I think everybody in the city knew that was coming, and having a Labour leader is in this city is going to mean that we've got somebody who cares about other people. They're kind of going to be somebody who's got ethical principles rather than aesthetic principles, and they're not just bothered about enriching kind of fat cats off in the Cayman Islands.
Yeah.
For me, it's a good thing.
So take it as a positive reaction.
Yeah.
How many though of the Green Party votes do you feel like are perhaps maybe a protest vote, maybe disillusioned Labour supporters who don't particularly like, I don't know, like Jeremy Corbyn? I've seen like a lot on social media saying like they would not want to vote Labour because they would not like to see him in power. Obviously that's the coattails effect of a leader. How many though do you think are of a protest vote?
I think there was a huge smear campaign about Jeremy Corbyn that a lot of readers of the Sun and the Mail and the Times and the Telegraph and the Express kind of bought into. My wife was one of them. She was absolutely adamant that she couldn't stand Jeremy Corbyn, and then I encouraged her to read what he was saying and watch what he was saying, and she immediately said, I've been so wrong. I've been kind of polluted by this constant griping at this man who, let's face it, he's got nothing but good principles. He will not be corrupted, and I think that's a really good thing.
So obviously you both support Labour. Touching on Paul's just said there, however, there has been a lot of a smear campaign directed more towards Jeremy Corbyn than perhaps like the manifesto hasn't really been attacked that much. Do you think this could maybe impact the election, or just because it was mainly directed towards him?
The fact that it was directed towards him, it just speaks volumes to me. You're not voting for him as a person, as a personality. You're voting for the manifesto and what he's actually going to do for the country. So whoever's not voted because of him as a person, then they seriously need to have a word with themselves. At the end of the day, we're all grown up here. We should be able to make an informed choice. We live in a day that the internet is at your fingertips. You can go out there, do your own research without having to listen to what's on the radio or what's on in your morning tabloids. You can actually get up there and see for yourself, do your research and make an informed decision on the party, on the politics, and not the actual person.
Alistair, do you think the treatment given to Jeremy Corbyn's been fair throughout the election campaign?
I think it's actually quite... there are lots of factors that interplay with one another on this. I think Corbyn has been subjected to a lot of ad hominem attacks and digging up, or making all kinds of unfounded assertions and allegations. I think also some of his colleagues, I think Diane Abbott has been subjected to a lot of abuse, which has bordered on... You kind of think if she was a white man, she wouldn't be getting that same sort of abuse for for saying exactly the same kind of things. I think that the most striking element in this is that in some ways this has been a complete Tory own goal, and we still don't know. The Tories might still emerge with a narrow majority. There's lots of things going to be going on through the night. But certainly Theresa May, when she called the election, her team seemed to want to present this not as a parliamentary election, almost like a presidential one, and by presenting things in such a personality-based way, what's actually happened is that Theresa May has been shown to be incredibly wooden and to lack any common human touch, whereas Jeremy Corbyn has actually shown himself to have a degree of warmth and humanity, which marks him out as somewhat of the exception amongst today's politicians. I'm not saying he's ended up perfect, but certainly by comparison with Theresa May, he comes across as being someone with whom, no matter what your political persuasion, you could have a conversation. Yeah. It's a bit hard to imagine having a dialogue of any sort with Theresa May, to be honest.
The fact that he also wants to keep our human rights, that's massive for me.
Yeah.
The fact that Theresa May wants away with our very rights, our core rights that were fought for, that worries me greatly as well. Especially with the way things are in this day and age. I don't feel like we've got a lot of security to start with, and there's a lot of divide and conquer, which the media don't help, but the government don't seem to put a stop towards it either. That deeply saddens me.
So, Suki, you work with a lot of homeless charities.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's been announced that Labour have now come in, obviously retain the seats in Sunderland.
Yeah.
What are you hoping they could do for you to sort of help and boost the charity work?
Build social housing for a start, affordable social housing. In Sunderland, if you're under age of 35-year-old, all you are entitled to at the minute is £45 a week. Now that needs to be looked at. Housing benefit, that equates to £180 a month. You can't get a room for that in this day and age. You can't get a room for that for £180 a month. Something seriously needs to be looked into that. This is why people are getting made homeless. This is why people are using more food banks than ever before. This is why people are using charities more than ever. Something does need to be done. It needs to be addressed. These people are... I can't even explain how in need they are. Something needs to be done, and start with social housing, affordable social housing, so these people can get off the streets and to not only exist but to actually start living, in one of the world's biggest democratic countries. It should not be happening.
So obviously you work with a lot of homeless people as well. How many of these people are homeless due to Tory austerity cuts? Is that been an impact?
Massive. I would go as far as saying 85-90%. Now that's massive. Yeah, there's people that choose a life that make them go down that route. But I'm dealing with people that have been nurses, ex-veterans. Yeah. People that have had long time careers. Our pensioners are living on the breadline. They are being made to work until they're late 60s, early 70s. They've paid into a pot all these years to be told that they're not going to get it at the end. You can't do that, right? There's elderly people that are homeless in this day and age. Shouldn't be happening.
Right, and we're going to leave that there. Hopefully we're going to go back to Dom James, who is at Silksworth Sports Centre. Hopefully we're going to get some reaction from him. Dom, are you there?
Hello, Ryan. Hello.
Yes,
Dom, so the announcement has just been from Horton and Sunderland South. The results are in. and Bridget Phillipson has won with 24,000 seats. When you look at last time, it's an increase of about 3,000. Last time she got 21,218, and I said just before, this time 24,665. But she has won, which was expected. But the increase in the Conservative votes is the interesting thing. Yeah, this time Paul Howell got 12,324 seats, where last time round in 2015 the Conservative candidate Stuart Hay got just 7,000. So you're looking at almost 5,000 increase there in votes on the Conservatives in Horton and Sunderland South.
That would be the UKIP supporters.
Oh, sorry, we've lost Dom again there. So as Dom was just saying, there's been an increase in Conservative vote within Horton and Sunderland. Are you quite surprised by that?
No. There's been a collapse in the Lib Dem vote, and there's been a collapse in the UKIP vote.
And I think a lot of UKIP voters have tactically voted and voted for Conservative.
So Lib Dem, not Lib Dem rather, UKIP has been sort of described as sort of kind of a one-trick pony. Their main, obviously, policy was to get us to leave Europe. That has been done. But why do you think there's been a collapse in the Lib Dem vote?
I think a lot of people haven't forgiven them for the time that they kind of promised to get rid of the student loans, and then they got into bed with the Tories and went back on their word. And people were crazy about Nick Clegg back then, however many years ago it was, 7 years ago or whatever. And then as soon as he kind of went back on his main promise, I think people have not forgotten that quite yet. So a lot of people have drifted to other left-wing parties. I mean, the Lib Dem policies are great. They seem very positive and very helpful to other people, but people don't seem to have forgotten that, going back on their word.
So we've had announcements from Newcastle and from Sunderland. We're now going to try and head over back to Paul. He's going to give us the latest reaction on Twitter. Paul, what's going on?
Well, Twitter's very, very busy, as you'd expect tonight. It's really been one of the first elections that's been campaigned for on social media. The youth vote seems to be up so far, that all-important 18 to 24 demographic that is woefully underrepresented in recent general elections. It was the one that Labour needed to come out to do well tonight, and according to the exit polls, it appears they have. Since I last spoke to you, the political editors of some of the major broadcasters and newspapers have been giving their say on Twitter. Laura Koonsberg, who of course is the BBC's political editor, has tweeted, "If that result is right," the if being the operative word, "May's high-risk gamble has gone badly wrong, and she's diminished, but early days and lots of margin of error." Sky News' political editor, Faisal Islam, he's pointed out that according to the exit poll, a progressive alliance could have as many seats as the Conservatives, and that's even the Conservatives with the Northern Irish Unionist parties, where a so-called progressive alliance of Labour, the Lib Dems, the SNP, the Greens, could actually have 2 more seats than the Conservative minority government that people have been talking about. So I think what we do know from this is that we don't know anything yet, and that this is going to go on for a few hours. This tweet from George Eaton, if you don't know who George Eaton is, he's the political editor of the New Statesman. He said that if May has to resign as Prime Minister, she'll be the shortest lived incumbent since Bonar Law in 1922-23. So these tweets and these predictions tonight that this is an unprecedented election, an election that no one saw coming. You look at nothing like this has happened in terms of a serving Prime Minister serving such a short term that Theresa May could in nearly 100 years. Now, as you know, Twitter is full of comedians, some better than others. 2 that I quite like the look of their tweets tonight. David Schneider, the broadcaster, comedian and writer, he says, "It seems the electorate has decided that no Tory government is better than a bad Tory government," of course making a reference to what Theresa May said about any Brexit agreement. And Charlie Brooker, who you probably know from presenting Newswipe, the brains behind Black Mirror, he said tonight that he has put in his request for the 2017 Wipe running time. You want 700 minutes, and we're only in June. Now, Google Analytics have been doing their thing and having a look at what the most talked about political parties on across Google searches have been tonight. Probably comes as no surprise that the Labour Party has been the most discussed. Of the 4 main English political parties, it doesn't mention the SNP here, the Labour Party, the Conservatives, the Lib Dems and UKIP, 41% of searches for political parties in the last couple of hours have been for Labour, followed by 20% the Conservatives, Lib Dems 15% and UKIP 10%. That of course reflects that the younger demographic who are more internet savvy, people like you and I who have kind of grown up with the internet, rather than our parents and grandparents who maybe aren't as au fait with it day to day. Most of the searches for the Labour Party. The final tweet I'm going to leave you with, though, is probably my favourite so far of the night. Nigel Adderley is a sports journalist, former BBC football commentator, and you've probably noticed that there's been a derby match tonight between Sunderland and Newcastle. Usually it's in the football. Tonight it's been who can declare first. For the last 6 general elections, Sunderland have managed to declare first. Tonight, of course, it was Newcastle Central. And Nigel Adderley has said on Twitter, David Moyes must be the returning officer in Sunderland this year. Hashtag GE 2017. Back to you.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. So, as Paul was touching on there, Theresa May could be one of the shortest ever lived Prime Ministers. Do you think she took a gamble calling the snap election?
Yes, obviously. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't just a gamble, it was kind of slightly, we'd had legislation in place to have fixed-term parliaments, so she had to go back and use the majority that she had then to overturn the legislation to actually allow for this. So, it wasn't exactly an done on a whim. She clearly thought that post-Brexit, that she was going to have a clear run and was aiming for a big majority. I would nonetheless sort of say, slight bit of caution. We've talked about young people, etc. Demographically, though, in the UK, the population is old, relatively old, and so we've seen results that have come in from pretty staunch Labour seats in any case. So I don't want to count my chickens before they've hatched.
Yeah.
And I've got too long a memory of having that little bit of hope, and then just seeing the hope dashed. So we haven't seen any of the southern seats coming in yet.
What about you, Suki? What do you think?
I think it'd be hilarious if she was. It's as simple as that. I think she's an idiot. She said that she wasn't going to call a snap election, and then surprise, surprise, bam, there we have it. So if she can lie about something as important as that, what makes you think that is going to be any better running the country?
So do you think it's to do with the fact when she called the snap election, Jeremy Corbyn and Labour were so far behind in the polls? Obviously, we know polls don't really mean a lot, as like Brexit would stop in and stuff like that. But do you think she called it because she thinks she was that far ahead? But
she was being cocky?
Yeah, she called it because she was that far ahead. I think she obviously expected at the time to increase the majority massively.
Which is underestimated. Yeah.
So Jeremy Corbyn has obviously, to be fair, has probably, in a sense, kind of ran a better campaign than her. He was more willing to defend his manifesto live on telly. Theresa May wouldn't appear on telly. I think Piers Morgan actually tweeted saying that throughout the election campaign she rejected their daily invitation to go on Good Morning Britain. So
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but to be fair to Theresa May, I think it's an entirely legitimate standpoint to say you do not want to appear on TV if Piers Morgan's in the same room.
Yeah.
Great.
But she also...
She didn't go to the leaders' debate though. Like,
I know.
If it was David Cameron contesting this election, David Cameron was more than happy to meet Gordon Brown in the 2010 election. He was more than happy to voice his opinions in a live TV debate, same against Ed Miliband in 2015. So why would Theresa May not want to meet Jeremy Corbyn live on telly?
Because she's too strong and stable.
For me, the whole decision to have this snap election was down to her kind of ego and arrogance that she was in power and she wanted to retain it for as long as possible. She wanted carte blanche to change these, I think it's 900 and odd laws that will need to be changed as part of Brexit. And she could do what the heck she liked with them if she had this majority. And consequently ruin our country for years and years to come. And like Alistair said, it's early days. We can't count our chickens yet, but it's fingers crossed.
Yeah, so at the minute there's only the two results we have of obviously Newcastle Central and Houghton and West Sunderland. They have both announced obviously for Labour. There's only two Labour at the minute. As Alistair said earlier on, we're still obviously waiting for the southern seats. They'll be the ones that matter most. But do you think that obviously because throughout the night Conservatives will grow in strength and they will get seats, do you think what we've seen so far could be a potential forecast for the rest of the country, or given the exit poll?
Too soon to say, but I think what we can say is that Theresa May's run a shockingly bad campaign, and that Jeremy Corbyn has probably run the most energising. No matter what, which side of which point on the political spectrum you are, you've got to acknowledge that he's actually done a masterclass in campaigning, certainly in terms of getting crowds together, like at the Sage on Monday night. In terms of what this points to for future campaign, I think it shows that actually going out there and for all the use of the savvy use of social media, etc., the messages you get out on social media that have the most impact are those which are rooted in real life interactions with people.
Yeah,
I mean, you mentioned the Pringle crisps and stuff like that. That wouldn't have gone viral if you hadn't had that kind of humanity, that common touch in there.
Say, but this happened in America before it happened here with Corbyn. Bernie Sanders went from 3% name recognition in America to almost becoming the kind of president of the United States, and he did that through an army of volunteers, and Corbyn has done something similar, and it's what the people want. That's what the masses want.
I think because the fact that so many people have come out and supported him, I think that has kind of put the wind up the Tories. There was quite a lot of memes and stuff on Facebook and on social media showing the masses and masses of people that had went to support Corbyn at the Sage, and then a very small similar room up in Edinburgh that Theresa May couldn't fill, and I got great pleasure out of that. So forget your polls, if that's anything to go by, I'll be very, very happy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so
we've had
go on, Fatma.
we've had Nick Clegg saying that there's no form of coalition. He can't see anything
with the Conservatives.
Party.
Nick Clegg, obviously, he's not in charge of the Lib Dems anymore, but he's a previous leader. He says that he can't see any coalition with the Conservatives. So if the Conservatives don't get a majority, I think potentially, obviously, as things have changed over the last few years, we could actually see a Labour Lib Dem coalition. Obviously, it wouldn't give them a majority run to form a government, but it's a step in the right direction, is it not?
Most definitely. Even though I've lost quite a lot of faith in Lib Dem, like my colleague says, because they didn't stand up to what they said they were going to do. I think the joining of both of them parties would benefit the country a lot more and would be a positive step in the right direction, rather than going the way that we are going now. And I think if they do happen to form a coalition government, and if we did get the likes of Nicola Sturgeon from the SNP on board, then I think we've got a massive chance of actually living a more peaceful life and doing more for our children to come and our elderly, basically everybody in society, not just for the elite. and the tax evading. I'll not swear on live television.
Yeah, please don't.
Yeah, but you get the idea about who I'm talking about. So
yeah, obviously though it is Nick Clegg saying it, it's not actually Tim Farron. Tim Farron will be the one that gets to make the decision. So even though that obviously yous would like to see them support with Labour, is there a chance though that the Lib Dems could form a coalition with the Tory government?
I don't think so. I think there'd be a national uprising if they dared to do that. After the last time, I think people are so fed up with the Tories, and I think the Lib Dems would disintegrate if they got into bed with the Tories again. They'd implode.
Yeah, so obviously they have seen what some people obviously are predicting, that it was to do with the previous coalition with the Tory government. Something that we're going to touch on now, though, that was obviously another key massive point in the election campaign. It's obviously everyone's favourite word, is Brexit. Now, this election has been described as the one that will deal with Brexit. Obviously, the government that wins it and gets a form government, they will be obviously the one negotiating Brexit. Yeah, so like some parties are going to offer another referendum on it. Do you think we should have another referendum on Brexit?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I voted to remain. I'm a languages teacher. I was lucky enough to be part of the Erasmus scheme, so I got to spend a year studying abroad. I believe in free movement across Europe, which is why I voted for the Green Party. For me, it's got to be the kind of down to the people of this country what Brexit we get. So we do need a second referendum because much of the stuff was missold to us. This kind of 350 million to the NHS deal, to name just one. I don't want a hard Brexit. I don't want to be out of everything, and kind of this whole idea of no deal is better than. I'm sorry, but that can't happen.
So you're saying that you would welcome another referendum. We've obviously had an election in 2015. We've had a referendum last year, and then we've obviously had another election this year. What do you think another referendum would accomplish, though? Because a lot of people, it's been described as voter apathy. A lot of people's fed up of politics and all they hear about. People just want to get on with Brexit. So what do you think would be accomplished by another referendum?
I accept the decision. I'm quite happy to accept the decision. I can't have my own way. Nor can the 48% of the population that voted remain. We will have to leave the EU. That's a fact. But I believe that the British public should have another referendum on exactly what we will be leaving, because nobody was told. Do we leave the customs union? Do we leave free kind of migration in different countries? What do we leave? What do we keep? I don't know.
We've just had some news saying that UKIP are losing by 13.4% throughout, the board. What do you think of that?
I'm very pleased by that. And just to pick up on an earlier point, I don't think we are saying, you can, and I've seen voter apathy. UKIP's popularity was centred really upon Brexit. But even then, I would say, we've mentioned the Brexit issue as well. I think it was a bit of a red herring. This focus upon the EU as the source of all the evils and sins in the world. It's not. And if you take a rational look at it, you could say, you can make a rational argument for possibly leaving the European Union. You can make a rational argument for staying in it. But that's not what UKIP at any point ever did. They went for this kind of strange kind of, let's blame the EU for everything, from the shape of our bananas to the fact that that school children aren't taught about pints and gallons in the same way they used to be. It's like, well, why aren't there 240 pence to the pound? It's like, hang on, right? What the heck has most of this got to do with the EU? So UKIP became a kind of a single issue party which just accumulated all the malcontents and people who just had gripes about the modern world, and they now seem to find their natural home in the Tory party. Now that the single issue party's gone.
Do you think it's just going to disappear eventually?
Oh, wouldn't it be nice not to see Paul Nuttall on telly?
I don't think they will. I think there's always going to be an element of the far right, especially with all the damage that's been done recently and for however many years. Obviously, war is a multi-billion, trillion pound money maker, isn't it? So I don't think whether we leave Brexit or whether we're not, or whether we have a referendum, whether we not, I think the choice has already been made. We're gonna leave. I was a Remainer. Again, I like the idea of moving around Europe quite freely and the benefits that come with that. The fact that that's all going to be stripped away, I think that's going to have a massive effect on the likes of foreign exchange students, for example. It's going to make things they bring a lot of money into the economy. What happens to them? Where do we stand with that? Again, in trades, we touched upon the pound losing
2%.
2%. What is actually going to happen? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I still think it's a little bit too early. As for UKIP, I'm overjoyed that they're losing. Hopefully, people are waking up and are seeing them for a one-trick pony. A party that bases its values and norms on being politically incorrect, especially when it comes to race relations and stuff. I don't want things like that in my country. I want unity. I want to see communities come together. I want them to work together for the problems, not to be blaming individual members of society. I want to see more deterrence, but come from everybody in the community. I want to see integration, not segregation. Do you know what I mean?
So do you think that the reduction of immigration would be, what do you think about that?
Right. This is it about immigration. If you say you're pro-immigration, you get hammered. If you say you're anti-immigration, you get hammered. There needs to be tighter controls on immigration to stop the things that are happening. Okay? I'm probably going to upset quite a few people, but terrorism is a tiny part of what's happening within Britain. A lot more people, hundreds and thousands, die because of heart disease in this country. A lot more die because of cancer in this country. 4 people have bought terrorism the last couple of months. 4 people created terrorism. Yeah, they can be dealt with. I feel bad saying it's only a small problem, but in comparison to the amount of people that are dying daily in Great Britain, it is small. So I find it really difficult to have issues with migration when there's so much more other stuff going on.
It's only going to get worse as well with famine and war and flooding. Migration is only going to get worse.
We've got money to go to illegal wars, but not enough to look after our people. To
be honest, I'm slightly uncomfortable with, and I know it's the argument that the right make about yoking terrorism to immigration. I think that's a complete misnomer. The two are completely separated
issues.
Separate issues.
Do you think tighter immigration and terrorism? Do you think that's going to stop it, or?
No, I don't think. The terror attacks that you've seen across history have usually been with people who are kind of, for want of a better term, homegrown. There might be from different cultural or background to the white majority, but it doesn't actually they're not tend not to be immigrants.
Education's the key. At the end of the day, the point that I have is, if we're going into these countries, we've had a number of people killed in our country, and it's deeply saddened. It's absolutely horrific and barbaric what's happened in our country. You go to the likes of Syria, right? How many people are dying there on a daily basis?
Syria used to be a beautiful country.
It has been destroyed. Hundreds and thousands of children, innocent people, are being killed, and nobody gets up, and nobody is standing up and saying, listen, this is terrorism, these people are dying, these are getting killed. Why is nobody standing up for them people? Why my mindset is, if you're going to go into these countries and you're going to do what people are going to be here, and they're going to be thinking, well, hold on, the West are doing this to us, we want revenge, and they're going to come along and seek revenge. It's in human nature.
Before we are going to touch on security. It's obviously a massive thing that has gone on the election campaign. We'll talk about that in a second. However, we're going to get a map up now to show how the country has currently voted so far. So far, the only 2 seats that we have had announced are the Labour. Labour have won both seats have been announced. It's been Houghton and West Sunderland that's been announced. Labour have won that, and also Newcastle Central that announced Labour as well. That beat Sunderland, and actually for the first time in 25 years, and was announced first. So just to give you an idea of how the country have voted so far within the 2 seats that have been announced, UKIP is down 13.4 on the polls. Obviously, we've just touched on that. That has happened. Obviously, we expected that. Lib Dem is just down 0.6%. That surprise anyone? That surprise anyone a little bit?
Well, it's a bit hard to say because the
Were you expecting it?
It was a bit hard to say because you're taking those stats from the 2 seats that have been, because you're not looking at a great Lib Dem strongholds in any case, so you can't. There's not enough. It's not a big enough number of Lib Dem voters to make for you to make a decent stab at whether the vote is genuinely, holding up, whether it's moving in any direction. You need a few thousand, several thousand more.
So obviously the Lib Dem voted down. Labour voters up 7%. Do you think that's to do with obviously disillusioned voters coming back, maybe who voted UKIP in the 2015 election, now coming back to Labour now that we have left the EU?
I think the 7% plus in a region that always votes Labour anyway is a really good sign of what's happening around the country.
It could be indicative of young people, the youth vote getting out. I mean, what might be interesting is looking at those areas where the youth vote is less concentrated, because the 2 seats that we've seen have quite high youth populations. They've both got good links to universities. They're kind of slightly hubs for younger people. So maybe they're not entirely representative constituencies in that way.
Well, Paul, you just mentioned there that it's a good sign for the country on a place that predominantly votes Labour. However, Conservative vote is actually up 8.6%. It's the highest vote that is up so far. So what would you say that has an effect on for the rest of the country as well? If you're saying that a 7% rise in a Labour area is good, what is a 8.6% rise of Conservative vote in a Labour area? What does that mean?
I think it means that a lot of people who voted UKIP last time have gone to the Conservatives. We've got to remember that there's been such a heavy pro-Conservative media bias in this campaign that a lot of people will have bought into that. So I'm not too surprised by the Conservatives. Everybody knew they'd do well.
We were back the live feed, unfortunately. I think we have had another Sunderland count announced, and we're going to try and get that with you very, very soon. Right, we're back up for the live feed, and we're about to hear another count. Dom James in the way there, of course. I think what we're seeing here is Julie Elliott. Julie Elliott has received 25,000 votes. I think what we're seeing here is the fact that Julie Elliott has won back her seat. She's retained her seat. There was 2,000 votes for Gary Layton from UKIP. That surprised anyone? Robert Oliver from Conservatives received 15,000 votes, so Labour is up 10,000 votes on the Conservatives.
And I think that's pretty much what people expected to happen.
And we're still waiting for more results to come through. Just bear with us. You're seeing Sunderland Sports Complex on your screen. Our reporter Dom James is there. Julie Elliott has just been announced to have retained her seat. That means 3 seats now to Labour. We've had 2 seats announced from Sunderland constituencies, one from Newcastle Central, who were the first to announce. Happy that Julia to retain the seat?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt, very happy. If the rest of the country goes the same way, then I'll be even happier.
However, overall the Conservative vote is still on the rise.
Like I say, I think that's again down to tactical voting. Instead of voting for UKIP, they've voted for Conservative because it's as close as they're going to get to their policies.
Statistics have shown that Conservatives are actually up 10% just in Sunderland Central itself.
Yeah.
Again, obviously, you're seeing like a lot of people's come back from UKIP to vote for like Conservatives and Labour, but is it not a telling sign for the rest of the country? Maybe the fact that in a Labour area, Conservative vote is still on the rise.
No, because so is the Labour vote.
Yeah, but the Conservative vote is rising quicker than the Labour vote in a Labour area.
I think it's a bit hard to extrapolate anything nationally from what is a solid Labour seat, which is never in doubt of. The Labour vote is held up, and what we have seen, and especially with the way the election's been presented, which has actually been to the detriment, I think, of all the smaller parties, and that's not just the Lib Dems, it's also hit UKIP, thank goodness, but also it's hit the Greens and to a degree Plaid Cymru and the SNP. Yeah. It's been presented in quite a binary fashion. It's been May against Corbyn, Labour against Tory, and that's been the overall narrative in the media. So that if you weren't going to vote Labour, then the presentation has been, well, you must be voting Tory. I think that might have been reflected in the results we've seen today, so that the Labour vote is held up and it's increased 7%, but those who are for whatever reason not inclined to vote Labour certainly the floating voters seem to have gone, well, if it's not Labour it must be Tory, and they've
bought into this media campaign.
It's not into their consciousness.
The winner, haven't they?
Yeah.
So you're saying that, to sum it up basically, because the mass media have directed that it is obviously Jeremy Corbyn versus Theresa May, Labour versus Conservative, that's what people tend to vote for more.
Floating voters, this could be, the core Labour vote seems to have held up. There'll be a core Tory vote, which was always going to vote Tory, and there's a clearly quite a small Lib Dem core vote, but the floating voters seem to have gone only to Labour or to the Tories.
Conservative votes are over by 9.1%.
Yeah.
So before the result got announced there for Julie Elliott, we were loosely touching on security. Obviously, it's been a massive thing. Obviously, the election's been halted twice because of 2 different terrorist attacks. And Jeremy Corbyn's been criticised massively for the fact that he would like to get rid of nuclear deterrence. We'll start with Paul on this matter. Obviously, you support the Green Party. You still say that you're pro-Labour. Do you think Jeremy Corbyn should get rid of their nuclear deterrence, or do you think they're there for a reason?
No, I want to live in a peaceful world without nuclear weapons. I don't want a deterrent. There are 192 other nations in the world, the international community, who don't have them, and they get along just fine, and I'm sure their citizens sleep in their beds at night. Why do we cling on to this old empirical view that we are this kind of tough, macho, chest-beating country who will have our way and rule Britannia and all this? We're a little island at the end of the day, and most of the people here want to be happy and peaceful. I don't think we need a nuclear deterrent anymore.
Okay. What about you, Suki? What do you think about the recent attacks? What do you think about Jeremy Corbyn being criticised for not saying or doing, having a stronger policy on that? What do you think?
I agree with Paul. At the end of the day, if he does get rid of the nuclear weapons, how many other countries may follow suit? I want to live in a world where I don't want to have to worry that somebody's going to press that button and we're all going to be wiped out. There's already enough fear in the world, and this guy's promoting something different, a change, some peacefulness. Why is everybody hung up on wanting to massacre hundreds and millions of people? I don't get that mindset. We are here as one race. we should live in harmony. We're only here for what, 60, 70, 80 years at a push. It's a very small time. We need to live together and to join together and stand in unity, you know, and like, if the deterrent's not there, then like, I'm sure he's not daft. He's just trying a different approach, because these approaches so far haven't done anything for us. They haven't taken us anywhere, and all I can see is, basically I can't see a way out of it under the Tory government.
I mean, obviously he's getting criticised a lot. Do you think that's going to be held against him?
If he gets criticised, he gets criticised. You know, at the end of the day, if it comes down to it, there's always a chance that he might keep the nuclear war. But if he's not wanting to push that trigger, then I want to be supporting somebody who doesn't want to advocate violence and World War III and whatever else. 3 generations of my family fought for Great Britain in both World Wars. I don't want to see them days again.
Okay, what about you, Alistair? I mean,
well, I think there's a lot of quite distinct issues which seem to have got mashed up and conflated in here. There's a terrorism issue, and then there's the kind of wider issue about nuclear deterrence, and I fail to see what nuclear deterrence has to do with terrorism. But quite the most dispiriting part of one of the most dispiriting parts of the election was with the question time on the BBC, when Jeremy Corbyn has been given a lot of grief from some, you know, kind of older white Tory men for refusing to say that he would launch a preemptive first nuclear strike. It's kind of, I'm sorry, you're castigating a man for saying, you know what, I probably wouldn't press the button that will destroy the planet. We've only got one planet, by the way. It's absolutely absurd. And Corbyn, I think, to be honest, Corbyn missed a slight trick. So he could have said, you know what, we're going to scrap Trident and we're going to spend lots of money beefing up, I don't know, bits of intelligence services, bits of conventional ground troops, because that's what they are. You know, those are forces that would be better placed to combat the threats that we actually do face now in the 21st century. You know, if he'd done that, he could have wrong-footed the Tories completely. As it is, you know, if you want to crack terrorism, the way I see it is, you know, stop illegal wars overseas, which foment unrest and foster resentment, have better surveillance, better relations with those communities which may have links culturally to people who might be minded towards, you know, extremism, and encourage, and with those better relations, then and also creating a better, more equal, juster society, then people will be less drawn towards any kind of simple solutions, that's how extremism works. It presents a very simple, wrong, but a very simple remedy to social problems.
If we infiltrate these societies with education and become more aware, just like Alistair says, and then we wouldn't need the likes of Trident, we wouldn't need nuclear wars. Do you know what I mean? If kids were taught mindfulness from the age of 3-4-year-old, the world would be a completely different place.
Just briefly there, Newcastle upon Tyne East has announced that Labour have held that seat. Obviously, the North East is still proven to be an incredibly strong Labour stronghold. We're getting more details on that as we get them. However, I just want to touch on something that you quickly just said, Suki. You said that if Jeremy Corbyn decides that he wants to keep the nuclear deterrence, even though he said in the session campaign he would think about getting rid of them, would that not tarnish your views slightly of him? He's gone back on something that he said that he would like to get rid of.
No, because if in need, by whatever possible means, then he would obviously have to go with that. Do you know what I mean? If we were going to be attacked by China or something, I don't think he would say, after obviously speaking to them diplomatically as he does, and if there was no other way, then I wouldn't blame him for keeping that.
One of the refreshing things he said as well in his campaign was that, well, actually, it's not all about my views. He listens to his party. So he's not just going to impose his views on nuclear weapons and nuclear factories and stuff like that on everybody. He listens to his party and he goes with the majority.
So what about you, Alistair? If Jeremy Corbyn, he has said he'd like to scrap them, if he kept them, would that tarnish your view of him a little bit, or would you like him to follow through on his sort of, not a promise it wasn't, but like what his core beliefs actually genuinely are?
Well, if he's going in, if we have a coalition, a progressive alliance, let's call it, progressive coalition, then there will be some of these, there will be certain issues which are kind of sticking points. My own personal belief is that, there's no need for us. Well, for start, Trident is ludicrously expensive. We could save the NHS with the money spent on Trident, save the NHS and social care and great swathes of the education system with the money that's earmarked for Trident. But also Trident is not really a UK weapon. It's entirely, US manufactured. It's the codes for launching it, etc. We don't really. The notion that the UK needs an independent deterrent. It's kind of willy waving, kind of this macho defence policy. But B, it's not really independent in the first place. I would be quite happy for Corbyn to say, what, we'll not have Trident. I mean, it's worth noting the SNP are anti-Trident. They don't want Trident to be in Scottish waters. But I also acknowledge that it's going to be a sticking point for some of his Labour backbenchers, because some of them are quite keen advocates of a nuclear deterrent. It will be a stick with which the media will beat Corbyn with, no matter which way he goes. Yeah. Because it's a divisive issue, and there are people divided. There are people on both sides of the argument in each of the parties, apart from the Greens and SNP. The media will have it both ways, because they'll be out to topple Corbyn at first chance.
Right, we're going to stop there for a little bit. We're going to get a map update very, very quickly. However, just before we do that, it's just been announced a little bit further far afield in the northeast. However, Swindon North have announced that has been a Conservative hold, so the Conservatives are now on the board in terms of the election. Right now, we're going to get a map update.
We have a roundup of the northeast results so far. Labour have held their seats in all three constituencies, in Newcastle Central, in Houghton and Sunderland South, and in Newcastle upon Tyne. Conservatives are up by 9.1 points with a total of 29.5%, while Labour are up by 6.4 points with a total of 59.7%. Meanwhile, UKIP are down by 13.7 points and have 4.9% overall. So that's MP Chai Unwara, Julie Elliott and Bridget Phillipson back in office in the northeast. No changes up here in terms of MPs.
Now if you're just joining us, we're going to go back over to Paul. He is keeping us up to date with what is going on social media and everything else. So Paul, over to you.
Hi, thanks. Well, social media has been going crazy over the last hour or so, as you'd expect, because this being an election that has been campaigned and discussed and churned through social media like no election before. Not even year and not even 20. This is the one where the youth vote appear to have come out, and a lot of that has been campaigning online, particularly from the Labour Party and the Lib Dems, where they've really gone very strong on their online presence. Now, since the exit polls came out at a few seconds past 10 o'clock, the biggest questions on Twitter have been, well, what's an exit poll? So in the first hour after the exit polls came out, these were the 4 top trending questions on Twitter, according to their own analytics. Question 1. What is an exit poll? Question 2, how accurate are exit polls? Question 3, how do exit polls work? And question 4, how are exit polls conducted? So that really is what people are discussing tonight. As you've just seen with the results, 3 North East seats have been declared, and they've gone as we've expected with the incumbent Labour Party candidates, and the seat in Swindon has gone to the incumbent Conservative. What's really interesting has been, though, the exit polls, as we know now, are predicting a hung parliament. However, since those first exit polls, the individual swings on each of those seats are pointing towards a stronger Conservative vote. Lord Ashcroft, former Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, so does declare an interest there. However, runs one of the biggest polling companies in Britain, and a very respected polling company, has said a hung parliament prediction on Twitter could be wrong because 76 of those seats are too close to call. Just let that sink in for a second. 76 seats, too close to call, even from the exit polls. So this really still could go any way. Adam Bolton, the former political editor of Sky News, has tweeted tonight, "If nothing else, this government does not look strong and stable tonight." This tweet from Nick Doody, which I like a great deal, has said, "Whatever your politics, please do get out and vote at the next general election in 6 weeks' time." Just reflecting the fact that this is unprecedented. That if we have a hung parliament by the result coming out, which we could know that by 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, then realistically 6 weeks is obviously just a bit of fun, but we could be looking at another general election in the next 6 to 9 months. Now, one of the things that we've been waiting for has been a discussion on what could happen if the non-Conservative parties, the so-called Progressive Alliance, do actually come together in a form of coalition. Now, just in the last few minutes, the Lib Dems press office have actually tweeted that they rule out a coalition with anyone, Labour or the Conservatives. Of course, the Lib Dems went into coalition in 2010 with the Conservatives. That's cost them a lot of their support and vote over the last 2 general elections. So they have categorically ruled out a formal coalition, which makes the possibility of a progressive alliance, a formal progressive alliance, even less likely tomorrow morning. Danny Shaw, BBC reporter, has tweeted, "The more the experts on BBC News explain the exit poll, the less I trust the findings." And that's one of the things I am seeing over Twitter and social media over the last half hour, that as these first 4 seats have come out, and yes, they've all stayed with the incumbents, but the Conservative swing has been a lot more than the exit poll expected. The election analyst for LBC, the London-based national speech radio station, Gareth Knight, has tweeted to say, if the first results are projected across the UK, there could be a Tory majority well into the 70s. So, as I say, we're still a long way from knowing a result. Finally, for now, though, my favourite tweet so far in the last half hour has come from Joseph Lake, at Economist Lake, and he's pulling this one from the IT crowd. Have they tried turning the UK back off and on again? Back to you.
Very much, Paul. We're going to head back over to Dom James, who was at the count. It's just been announced in the last few minutes, though, that Washington and Sunderland West has been a Labour hold again. We're going to now head over to Dom James, who has an interview with Paul Howell, who is a Conservative candidate for Houghton and Sunderland South. Over to you, Dom. I think we're having a few sound issues here. Yeah, we'll try and bring that interview when we can. We're having a few technical issues there. So as was announced, Labour has held all 3 seats so far in its constituency. Washington and Sunderland West have just announced that Labour has retained the seat. We'll get you the statistics and stuff like that and how the people voted. Again, not a surprise to anybody, is it really? It's obviously a Labour stronghold. Before we went to the map update and Paul to tell us more about Twitter, we were talking about security in the general election. We touched mainly on nuclear deterrence. Now we're going to go to terrorism, and obviously it's been a massive thing. The election campaign had to stop twice. Theresa May has typically been described as going to go down on terrorists a lot harder than what Jeremy Corbyn is.
Well, why doesn't she stop funding the likes of Saudi Arabia and that in the first place, and the people that actually are supplying arms to ISIS?
But a lot of...
Why aren't we, why isn't she, why is she doing that in the first place? If she wants to crack down on terrorism as much as she wants, why is she enabling them?
But I think it's the same time, she might be enabling them, but the bomber who obviously targeted the Ariana Grande concert at Manchester, he was actually radicalised in the UK.
But he was allowed to go back and forth from Libya when they wanted to take Gaddafi out. She let plenty of people to leave here to go out and fight and return back and stuff. So it just seems she can pick and choose.
Was that when she was Home Secretary?
Yeah. At the end of the day, she was in the post for nearly seven years. She should know a lot more about our security and what's going on in the intelligence. Do you know what I mean? You're telling me what's happened in London, but there's very little footage in and around London about this terror attack. We are the third most watched country in the world. How are these things happening? How are these things happening with all the security measures that we are meant to have in place? It's down to people like her.
But why do you think in the mass media that the mass media seem to portray Theresa May as more of a secure option when it comes to dealing with terrorism? Why do you think that is, rather than Jeremy Corbyn?
Because it's hidden.
It suits
the agenda.
Suits their agenda. It suits big media outlets because Theresa May is very corporate friendly. I mean, she proposes what they present, what they portray as being solutions to terrorism, which on close inspection have nothing to do with. They'll have next to no impact upon terrorism, but they will kind of push things to a more kind of authoritarian state. You know, they're kind of breaking encryption for the internet, and which is going to knock internet banking for a start. But you know, great surveillance of everyday citizens without acknowledging the big kind of money nexus which Suki's pointed to, which is, you know, the UK's uncomfortable and I would say unsavoury relationship with Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia, you know, the UK, particularly under the Tories, but also to a degree under Blair, kind of goes down on bended knees before the Saudis in terms of, you know, trying to get financial deals, etc. And it's chiefly Saudi money that propagates the most hateful pro-terrorist materials.
Paul, what's your angle on it? Why do you think the media tend to portray Theresa May as being able to deal with terrorism a bit more strongly than Jeremy Corbyn?
I think this tough stance that she's banging on about ripping up human rights acts and things like that, for some people will be a solution that makes sense, but it just flies in the face of what humanity is all about. There's a great documentary by a guy called Professor Adam Curtis called Hypernormalization, and it explains all of these things that have gone on in the past about how our country funded Gaddafi when it suited us, and then when he wasn't Flavour of the Month, we blamed him for things that were going on in other Arab states which weren't actually anything to do with him. And when you watch something like that, it makes you realise that you've been missold this tripe for years.
Yeah, so we're going to leave that there. Alistair quickly did touch on Theresa May and particularly the Tory party supporting big corporations. We're going to have a little discussion about that in a second and what it could mean for the local area of Sunderland as well. But we're going to go back to Dom James, who was at the Silkswood Sports Complex. We tried to bring you an interview with Paul Howell, who was the Conservative candidate for Houghton and Sunderland South. I think we have that interview now. No, I think we're still having technical issues. Right, we're having some technical issues, so we're going to move on to bigger corporations. Theresa May and the Tory party, one of their manifestos, they were not going to raise the tax on these corporations. However, Labour say that they would like to raise the tax on these corporations. So what is your standpoint on that? What do you think it'll mean for a local area to raise sort of business tax a bit more?
When you're an entrepreneur, Alistair, what does it mean?
That's the first time I've been called an entrepreneur. I think, well, you know, corporation tax, it's principally, I think that we have had a system which has been so embedded, particularly to the City of London, and money manipulators is what you call a rentier economy, so that those companies which actually make and produce tangible goods, those people which produce services which are of real human value, are increasingly parceled up and sold off as parts of financial instruments to venture capital, which leads to the state that it's essentially financial manipulation and leveraging, which underpins most of the UK economy. I would like to see those kind of practices really quite heavily squeezed, and some kind of wealth tax imposed, to be honest, as opposed to an income tax. In terms of the corporations, there is a school of thought that sort of says, well, if you raise corporation tax too much, then corporations will go elsewhere. But actually, corporation tax in the UK is really, really low, and a rise in corporation tax would still leave the UK as one of the lowest in the whole of the Eurozone, in the whole of the European continent. I think it's time to call the bluff of the Tory apologists who sort of said, "Oh, you'll scare off you'll kill the goose that laid the golden egg," if you like, saying, "No, actually, it's about time we
trust the talent in this country.
Yeah.
We've got enough talent to make things work for us."
Would you agree to this?
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, we have an environment which is actually favours larger multinational corporations to the expense of small family firms, small startups, etc. And that needs to be addressed.
It does need to be addressed by both parties, really, because the small business is being wiped out slowly and stuff. So I think Labour does need to look at that also, but Conservative, nothing's worked up until now. So the wiping out little family-run businesses that have been in generations and generations of families and stuff, and that's quite sad to see. When the likes of Google, massive multinational companies, are getting away with paying meagre amounts of tax, there's a massive divide, and that divide needs to come to a lot closer together.
Would you like to see, though, whatever government comes into power after the end of tonight, crack down massively on the fact that big national companies like Google, for instance, I think Starbucks is another one, that they don't really pay tax?
Yeah.
Would you really like to see, whatever government comes to play, if it's a Tory government or Labour coalition, anything like that, would you like to see them really crack down?
Massively.
Should that be one of the top things on their
agenda?
agenda?
One of the top things is, because that money could change the lives of our kids to come, and the people that have got kids, the people that will ensure that our old people will get pensions, it'll ensure kids will not be 7 pence for breakfast. Do you know what I mean? 7 pence for a child's breakfast. How do you? I don't have the words. The fact that social care would be taken care of, our NHS wouldn't be privatised. The fact that students wouldn't have to pay mega student fees in order to better themselves. Yeah, that money would come in a lot handier than what it is them being able to evade it year after year after year, while they get richer and richer, and they're not actually helping anybody within the economy.
So we're hopefully, now I'm getting word that we hopefully can go back to Dom James, who was at Silksworth Sports Complex for the third time. Luckily, we want to try and get an interview with Paul Howell, who was the Conservative candidate for the Houghton and Sunderland South ward.
Okay, so I'm with Paul now, the Conservative MP, well not MP, candidate rather, for Houghton and Sunderland South. Good turnout for you this time, nearly 12,000 in votes.
Yep, it's a nice step forward. It's the best we've had in this ward since about 1992, and it's 12,000 compared to 7,000 last time in round figures, so very substantial increase on the vote that we've taken.
Would you say a lot of them votes are taken from maybe UKIP this time round?
Certainly, looking at the numbers, that's what you would anticipate. Unless there's some massive switching going around all over the place, the UKIP vote has dropped substantially. It looks very much as though we've taken a very significant part of that vote, and hopefully that's replicated across the country.
So obviously that is, as you just said, it might be a big indication to what happens elsewhere. Labour also taking a few extra seats this time around, nearly 3,000 more compared to last time. But do you think, in terms of how many votes you've taken from UKIP, Do you think that will ultimately stand you in good stead for the rest of the seats?
Well, you hope so, and I think it's a fair assumption to make in terms of extrapolating out into polls. But there's only one poll that matters, and we'll see that as the evening goes on, or the morning goes on even.
Yeah, so obviously Theresa May has been quite low-key almost in terms of not doing debates as such this time round, not maybe debating with Jeremy Corbyn. Do you think that was the right tactic? Because obviously young voters maybe have got out more for Labour this time. Is that fair?
I don't know. I don't think that's fair, really. I think that to say that she didn't invite debate, she went to more media things with the press and debated with them right around the country. All that Jeremy did was go and stand at a few marches with all of his people in front of him and just spoke to them. That wasn't a debate. That wasn't a challenge. I think that where we've come to is fine. I think that if you're looking at the youth vote and where it's at, I think that Labour are just bribing them. With the removal of the tuition fees and the proposal of a £10 minimum wage at a rate that we can't do. The Tory party is the one that's increased the minimum wage better than anybody in recent times, and I think they've just been misled, and I hope that it doesn't manifest itself in the way that it could do.
Okay, so the Conservatives kind of made sure that Brexit, they are the right party for Brexit. What is the Conservatives going to make sure, what are they going to do to make sure that we get the best deal possible?
Well, I think what you need to do is just be in charge of things. You need to have a cohesive team with a cohesive argument. And the one thing that the Conservatives have is a team that's together and a team that will work with each other. I mean, the Labour Party MPs can't agree with their leader, never mind the Labour Party leadership trying to agree with the SNP or the Lib Dems or whoever else they have to agree with. So I think that's where the challenge comes in terms of trying to get a cohesive agreement for Brexit. We are the party that will do that better than any other.
Okay, so just final thoughts on the people that did vote for you this time round, a big increase.
Yep, absolutely delighted with the people that took the time to come out and vote for the Conservatives in this area, which is a thing that we need to see developing further. We need to move that British majority down and further next time, and hopefully get closer to a challenge in the future.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
That was Dom James there with Paul Howell, who was the Conservative candidate for Houghton and Sunderland South. We just have news through that Newcastle upon Tyne North has been another Labour hold. And turnout for so far in the election is 65.4%. So quite a high turnout at the moment amongst the 7 seats that have been announced, 6 of which have been in the North East, Sunderland and Newcastle, and then there's one in Swindon North, which has been held by the Conservative Party, as you can see by the map that's on our screen. Obviously still early days, but what is this sort of big turnout going to tell us about the rest of the country? Do you think it's going to continue like that, or do you think that percentage will drop throughout the night?
I'm quite surprised by that figure because it was pretty miserable out there today. It was tipping down with rain.
Yeah, a lot of people were saying that the rain will put people off. Obviously, it hasn't so far.
Yeah. I don't know. Time will tell, I suppose.
What do you think a key turnout will be like? Rephrase that rather. What do you think like a bigger turnout would mean for this election? Do you think people are more interested in it because of the issues surrounding the election in comparison to previous elections?
Possibly, but received wisdom is that a higher turnout probably will favour Labour, but this is clearly not an election like too many other ones, so I wouldn't like to make too many stabs in the dark about things. What lessons can we learn? I don't know. There has been an energising aspect to the Corbyn campaign, which has stood in marked contrast to what the Tories have done, which has been essentially a negative form of campaigning. And I think that has helped. And there's a parallel with what happened in Scotland with the Scottish referendum, where those seeking independence actually again captured a lot of the youth vote and again energised. And no matter which side of the debate you saw, it provoked more conversations and debate around politics and generated a higher turnout. So maybe it is, you need to get that kind of mass movement going, and that improves the quality of political engagement.
Suki, what do you think like a high turnout means for this election?
I'm hoping that it is the young coming forward voting for Labour. I hope it is indicative that they've come out for the masses.
Some interesting points have been made by Paul Howell, saying that Labour has been bribing with student tuition fees. And
I find that hilarious, I really do. If that's what it is, they can bribe me all day long. The fact that they actually want to do things for our younger generation in order to give them better starts in life, well, that can only be a good thing. And as far as bribery is concerned, if that's the I don't know. I don't even know where that school of thought comes from, really. It must be something that the Tories are quite used to.
Well, bribery.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very strange way to talk about, you know, a redistributive policy, which is based upon, well, we are not going to charge students what we previously charged, to cast that someone as being a bribe, which is an illegal inducement to somebody to do so. You know, we kind of go,
that's a typical name calling. Yeah.
Quickly ask Paul, because you're a teacher, secondary teacher. I mean, what are your thoughts on that statement?
It's just typical Tory name calling. When they hear something that they don't want to hear, they kind of put up the barriers and respond with abuse or bribery. Is it bribery? I don't think it is. I think it's a promise of a better life for people. Surely that's a good thing for people. And you know, going back to the migration thing, anybody who wants to better their life, surely that is a good quality in a human being. And it's the same with this about tuition fees and wanting to go on and better themselves by going to university. That's got to be a good thing. So I'm afraid I disagree with the gentleman.
So we're going to wrap up very, very soon. Quickly though, we're going to go around all three of you. What, for the rest of the local counts, especially because Middlesbrough hasn't been announced yet, Hartlepool hasn't been announced yet, what are you predicting for the rest of the local counts in terms of how the parties will do?
I think the North East will be heavily weighted, as we've seen tonight, with Labour doing very well, and then less so the Conservatives, UKIP, Lib Dems and the Greens. I'd like to see a higher proportion of voters for the Green Party, and the numbers that I've seen tonight so far have been quite positive. But the rest of the country, I think, will produce our next government.
What about you, Suki?
I don't think the North East has got anything to worry about as far as Conservatives are concerned. Let's see what happens down south, because they are very staunch Conservative supporters. That's who we need to convince. That's who we need to get on board, and let's hope that.
So you're not worried about the North East?
No, not whatsoever.
Would you agree to that?
I will be quite surprised if we see any North East seats change hands. It'd be interesting to see what happens to James Wharton, who's a Tory in Teesside, and Anne-Marie Trevelyan, who's Northumberland, Berwick in Northumberland.
That's indicative of the area, though, really.
Well, it is, but you know that has previously been Lib Dem. So I mean, those are the kind of two standouts. You kind of go, well, it'd be interesting to see if they're reduced or not. But I'd be surprised if I can't see any of the current Labour seats being lost. So
that's your ideas for the local aspect of it. Now we're going to ask you to put all party bias aside. Everything you've seen throughout the election campaign, stuff like that. We're going to go individually again. We'll start with you, Suki. What do you think? Not what you'd like not what you'd like to happen. What do you think will happen nationally? Try and predict. Do the impossible thing, and try and predict what you think. Tomorrow morning, well, obviously this morning we'll bring now. What do you think will happen after all seats have been announced?
I think Labour's going to win.
Straight up majority, or do you think it'll be a hung parliament and a coalition?
I think it'll probably be hung. I'm being very positive, and it's what I want. It's what I'm hoping most of the country wants. Please.
Alistair, what about you?
I think what we'll see tomorrow morning is a lot of pollsters and a lot of political commentators, no matter what the result is, political commentators and pundits struggling to justify their existence because they've all been scattergun all over the place. I think I'm inherently a bit of a natural pessimist, so I'm inclined to think there'll be I think they'll, over the course of the night, we'll see Tory seats come in. I think we'll see probably a very slim Tory majority, but don't hold me to that because, like I've been saying, this is one of those elections where nobody knows anything, yet some people are getting paid to go and tell you to tell us what their views are. Just to reiterate, we're not getting paid.
Unfortunately. Paul, what about you? What do you genuinely think this outcome of the election might be? Trying an impossible task, wouldn't you?
I'd agree with Soki. I'd quite like to be skipping to work in the morning with a hung parliament. No
problem. So the consensus here is hung parliament. We're going to quickly just recap over what has happened so far in the North East. Labour has held all 3 of its seats in Sunderland. Newcastle has also announced all 3 of its seats they are held by Labour. And the only Conservative seat so far is to be Swindon North, outside the North East. Outside the North East, they have the only Conservative seat to hold so far. So, yep, Labour's hold all seats in their constituencies in Newcastle Central, Houghton and Sunderland South, Newcastle upon Tyne North, Sunderland Central, Newcastle Central, and Washington and Sunderland West. I think that is just about it from us tonight. Massive thank you to Suki, Alistair and Paul for coming in and talking to us. I know it's been a long night, it's very early in the morning now. Also, massive thank you to Paul for being our Twitter analyst, also Peter, who was the political expert at the account with Dom James, and Dom James reporting on it, and Fatima, thank you for being here as well.
Thank you.
This has been Election Night Live at the Sunderland University.